We're joined by Rob Doar. Rob is the Senior Vice President, Government Affairs for the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. In this role, Rob is responsible for all aspects of our legislative and political activities, including legislative strategy, lobbying, political strategy, and coordination with other gun rights organizations. Rob, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
What's I don't even know where to begin. What is your reaction to the Uvalde, Texas situation?
Well, I mean, it's clearly a tragedy. I think anybody who isn't shaken by these events is something's wrong with them. What frustrates me the most is how quickly political these things come. Within a couple of hours, anti-gun groups were sending out fundraising emails and pushing for agenda items before we really knew any of the facts whatsoever. And then that, of course, drives our side of the issue to need to respond. I just wish everybody could take a minute, focus on the victims, and then take the time to look at where were the cracks, where were the warning signs, and come together to try to stop these things from happening.
In your role with the Gun Owners Caucus, what would you suggest to mitigate school shootings?
So there's a wide array of things that happen. I think the first thing is to realize that while they shock the conscience and while they're horrific in their nature, school shootings are incredibly rare. Your child is 10 times more likely to die in a bus accident on the way to school than in a school shooting. But from there, we certainly need to look at things. I think one of the most glaring issues that we saw with this particular shooting is some infrastructure issues. The shooter was able to get in unobstructed through a propped open door. I'm actually a substitute teacher as well, and I see a wide array of different strategies that schools employ. Some of the schools that I work at, there's a double door entry system. Any guests have to check in. There's a school resource officer right there, and then there are alarms on all of the doors. If a door is left open, if a door is propped open, if somebody comes in that door, a staff member can then go and investigate and see what's going on. So, I mean, there's a wide array of just things to keep our kids safe that can go on upstream. We need to look at mental health. Clearly, I mean, we have a huge issue with mental health in our society, particularly in our schools. And our schools are in a unique position to be able to identify these individuals who are at risk and try to connect them with resources before something like this happens.
Well, this guy wasn't checked. He wasn't followed up on. Apparently, 4 years ago, he made a similar threat to shoot his school, and you seal those juvenile records, and that's a problem because then he goes to buy a gun, and there's no evidence that he should not be allowed to. What's the age in Minnesota for somebody to buy a weapon?
So if you're looking to buy a long gun, so whether it's a hunting rifle, a shotgun, or a military style firearm, that's 18, and then it's 21 for handguns.
Where do you stand on the background checks? Are they rigid enough?
Well, so this individual did pass background check, passed two of them, within days of the shooting, and even his juvenile record wouldn't have met the threshold to disqualify him from firearm ownership. I think that background checks are they're thrown out as these kind of catch-all solutions, but when in the scope of mass shootings, the vast majority of the shooters acquired their firearms legally through an existing background check, and from there it becomes a question of at what point do we consider somebody unsafe to own a firearm? Is it because they're seeing a therapist? Is it because they might be on medication? I mean, at what point does it trigger all people to lose their constitutional rights?
Would you be in favor of making the age in Minnesota 21 for all guns, long guns and handguns?
I think we need to decide as a society at what point an adult is an adult. So if we want to raise the age to 21, I think there's a lot of research that shows that brain development doesn't happen until or doesn't cease until you're in your early to mid 20s, and I think there's a lot of validity to that research. But if you're 18, you should have full, or if whenever we decide that your age is an adult, you should have full exercise of all of your rights. So whether if you're going to sign contracts, join the military, go off to college, you should be able to exercise, vote, all of those rights you should have full exercise of. So that's where we're at with that. If we want to raise the age to 21, that's a conversation worth having, but rights are rights.
Do you occasionally listen to Garage Logic by any chance?
Oh yeah, I mean I've listened. My dad listened to you years ago back when you were on.
How's
the
that
live
make you
radio.
feel, Joe? His dad
nice
used to
and
listen
old,
to you.
yep.
I've heard that before. Well, the reason I ask is you've heard me say then that I believe there's a profound decline of moral and ethical integrity in this country. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
No, I agree. I think I think people are becoming more distant and less connected to each other.
And I've been misinterpreted. Well, I guess I wasn't, because I said it wouldn't bother me if an assault weapons ban was reintroduced. We had one for 10 years. I'm not interested in removing any Second Amendment principles. People think I am. I'm not. I am interested in making it harder for that kid in Uvalde to own those two weapons. I'm very interested in making them more difficult to obtain. But even then, I'm being naive, because there's how many tens of millions of these types of weapons are already in existence out there, and they're in the hands of responsible people. So I don't know where I am.
Well, and government has never been successful at prohibiting anything, whether it's drugs or illegal immigration or alcohol or illegal software and music downloads. I mean, the government has shown that they're incapable of managing that type of a ban that would actually be needed to have the kind of effect. Not that I'm advocating for it, but so I think we need to look at solutions. And I think there's so much common ground if people could step away from their corners for just a little bit. So much common ground around mental health resources, around connecting people who are in crisis with resources. Things like school resource teams that can help students identify individuals, threat assessment teams who might be in crisis. I mean, had that been in place, this guy may have been under a little bit more scrutiny. Things like that. But then, there are some court interventions that can happen too that I believe are consistent with individual rights. There's a lot of talk about things like red flag laws, where those have some issues. Where somebody makes an accusation, goes and gets a court order, and now your guns are taken away, and you never even had a day in court. We've got problems with that. There are other things that actually address the person in crisis, where it's not a full civil commitment, but they have outpatient treatment during that time until their treatment is completed. Their firearms are removed, and then once they complete their treatment, once they're signed off on, they get full restoration of their rights again. I think there are some common sense things that we can all agree on, but everybody has to stop fighting from their corners to get it.
Do you anticipate that'll happen?
It's an election year, so everything is hyper politicized. I'm not optimistic, but I remain hopeful. Our organization, we work regularly with with groups like NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness in Minnesota, to work on strategies to reduce suicides, to reduce violent crime. One thing that they're really concerned about is stigmatization of mental illness. Not only a small minority of people who are mentally ill are a danger to themselves or others, and it's a matter of working on strategies to try to identify those people. I think that's ultimately going to be the only thing that's successful in preventing these types of shootings.
Mental illness is so often referenced. Why is mental illness so prevalent? What's going on in society? Well, I think I tend to answer my own question. I'm not sure it's all mental illness. I'm sure it's an absence of any value for human life. Obviously, this kid in Texas didn't have any respect for human life, and I don't know how you identify that.
Right. I agree.
Rob, now that we've chatted, let's keep you on our Rolodex and be in touch.
Yeah, anytime. I'd love to.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Rob Doar is the Senior Vice President for Government Affairs for the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus.